Billionaire CEO hired Waitress, who solved, with a napkin, a multi-million-dollar problem that 20 analysts couldn't solve.
You can help us a lot by subscribing to our channel and sharing this video. 1 triple shot, half calf, no foam, extra hot oat milk latte for Captain Awesome. Maya stared at the name she'd just called out, a monument to her own passive aggression. Across the counter, a man in a suit that cost more than her car payment snatched the cup. He didn't make eye contact. He never did. He just grunted, grabbed a fistful of napkins, and marched out of the Gilded Bean, the most pretentiously named coffee shop in downtown Sterling. Another satisfied customer, or at least another caffeinated one. Her manager, Chad, slithered up beside her, his face a mask of oily disapproval. Maya, what did we say about the names on the cups? We said to spell them correctly, and I did. Captain... That's not his name. His name is Mr. Sterling, as in the guy whose family owns this entire city block. A little respect, please. We're trying to cultivate an atmosphere of premium service, not a circus. Maya just smiled, a sweet, empty smile she reserved exclusively for Chad. My mistake. The handwriting on the order slip must have been heroic. Chad narrowed his eyes, unconvinced, but was distracted by the chime of the front door. An old man shuffled in, wearing a tweed coat that clearly survived several decades, and a scowl that looked just as ancient. This was Arthur, her 10:15 a.m. appointment with misery. He was as regular as the sunrise and twice as scorching. "The usual, I suppose," Arthur grumbled. Not as a question, but as a statement of inconvenient fact. His voice sounded like gravel in a blender. Maya turned to the espresso machine, her movements fluid and practiced. 1 black coffee, so dark and bitter it questions its own existence, coming right up. A faint, almost imperceptible twitch appeared at the corner of Arthur's mouth. It might have been a smile, but it could have just been a facial tic. With him, it was impossible to tell. He slapped a crumpled $10 bill on the counter. "Keep the change," he rasped. "Wow, a whole $7. I'm halfway to retiring. I'll buy a small island and name it Alcatraz in your honor." The twitch came back, a little more defined this time. He didn't respond, just took his coffee and shuffled over to his usual corner booth, the one with the cracked leather seat. He sat there every day for exactly 1 hour, staring out the window, looking like a man who had lost a war. Chad watched him go. "Honestly, I don't know why we let him take up a whole booth. He's bad for the premium atmosphere." Maya leaned against the counter, polishing a glass. "He pays, Chad, and, unlike Captain Awesome, he actually leaves a tip. Besides, I think he adds a certain vintage charm, like a cursed artifact in a museum." She didn't know how right she was. She saw a grumpy old man in a worn-out coat. She had no idea she was serving black coffee to Arthur Vance, the reclusive billionaire founder of Vanguard Innovations, a man whose actual net worth had more commas than the Gilded Bean's entire inventory, a man who was about to change her life, or, at the very least, make it a lot more complicated. The mid-morning rush was a predictable storm of entitlement. Today's special was a trio of young men who looked like they'd been assembled in a lab dedicated to creating the perfect tech bro. They wore identical vests over identical button-down shirts and spoke in a rapid-fire volley of buzzwords. "The issue is scalability," the first one said, gesturing wildly with a croissant. "We need to synergize our core competencies to leverage the next-gen blockchain architecture." "Bro, totally," the second one agreed, nodding sagely. "But the UX/UI on the beta is a nightmare. We're losing engagement. We need to disrupt the paradigm." The third one, who had been furiously typing on his laptop, slammed it shut. "Forget the paradigm. I can't even solve this stupid logic puzzle from the pre-interview screening for the new senior architect. It's impossible." Chad, sensing an opportunity to network with potential future billionaires, practically teleported to their table. Gentlemen, is there anything I can get you? A complimentary cronut, perhaps, on the house for our most valued innovators. The first tech bro waved him away dismissively. We don't need cronuts. We need a solution. Look at this. He spun his laptop around. On the screen was a complex grid puzzle involving a series of colored nodes that needed to be connected without any of the lines crossing. It was a digital version of a classic logic problem, but fiendishly difficult. 7 nodes, 7 colors, 1 continuous path. Our top 3 coders have been stuck on it for an hour. Maya, who was wiping down the counter nearby, glanced over. Her brain, which thrived on patterns and puzzles as a way to escape the monotony of her job, instantly started mapping pathways. She saw the flaw in their approach immediately. They were all trying to start from the edges, the most obvious points. They weren't seeing the core constraint. She walked over, coffee pot in hand. "Need a refill?" she asked, her eyes fixed on the screen. "We need a genius, not a waitress," the second tech bro muttered, not bothering to look up. "Well, today's your lucky day. You get both," Maya said flatly. She pointed a finger at the screen. "You're all starting from the outside." "Wrong. Look at the blue and the orange nodes. They have the most restrictive paths. If you connect them first, through the center, the rest of the puzzle basically solves itself. It's a classic 7 bridges of Königsberg problem, just with more colors and less 18th century pressure." The 3 men stared at her. Chad's face went pale. "What would you know about?" the third one started. But then he looked back at the screen, his fingers hesitantly tracing the path she had suggested. His eyes widened. "Wait a second. Holy, it works!" A stunned silence fell over the table. The 3 innovators, the paradigm disruptors, had just been schooled by the barista. They didn't say thank you. They just stared at the solved puzzle, their arrogance momentarily short-circuited. In the corner booth, Arthur Vance slowly lowered his coffee cup. He had watched the entire exchange, his expression unreadable. But for the first time all morning, he wasn't looking out the window. He was looking directly at Maya, and the gears in his formidable mind were beginning to turn. He had built an empire by recognizing undervalued assets, and he had a feeling he had just found one serving him coffee. The silence that followed was thick and satisfying. The tech bros gathered their things without another word, a silent pack of defeated wolves. They didn't glance at Maya as they left, but she could feel the heat of their embarrassment radiating across the room. As the door chimed, marking their exit, Chad's face contorted into a mask of pure panic. "What was that?" he hissed, his voice a venomous whisper. "Are you out of your mind? We have a brand to protect." Maya continued wiping the counter, her movement slow and deliberate. "Relax, Chad. I just provided some unsolicited technical support. It's part of our new synergized customer engagement initiative." "Those weren't just customers," Chad sputtered, grabbing a cloth and furiously polishing an already gleaming machine. "That was the founding team from Synapse Dynamics. They're on the cover of Wired for Wealth magazine this month. They come here for the ambiance, not to be humiliated by the help." "The help has a name," Maya said, her voice losing its playful edge and hardening slightly. "And for the record, they were humiliating themselves long before I stepped in. They couldn't solve a puzzle designed for a college freshman." "And you could?" Chad sneered. "What are you, some kind of secret genius? If you're so smart, why are you pouring coffee for a living?" The question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. It was the question Maya asked herself every morning when her alarm went off at 4:30 a.m. The ghost of a half-finished mathematics degree, abandoned due to a mountain of debt and a family crisis, flickered behind her eyes. She opened her mouth to reply, a sharp retort already on her lips, but a gruff voice cut through the tension. "Because even geniuses need to pay rent." Both Maya and Chad turned. It was Arthur. He had risen from his booth and was standing at the counter, his empty ceramic mug in his hand. He placed it gently on the polished surface, his gaze fixed on Maya. There was an intensity in his eyes she had never seen before. He ignored Chad completely. "Königsberg,
Impressive. Most people your age think it's a new flavor of vape. He held her gaze for a moment longer, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. It was a fleeting, almost imperceptible connection, but it was more direct communication than she had received from him in 6 months of serving him coffee. Then he turned and shuffled out the door, his ancient tweed coat disappearing into the bustle of the city street. Maya stood frozen for a second, a strange feeling settling in her chest. It was the oddest compliment she had ever received. Chad just scoffed, shaking his head. Whatever. Just remember your place, Maya. One more stunt like that and you'll be looking for a new place to be a secret genius. But his threat barely registered. Maya was replaying Arthur's words in her head. It wasn't just what he said. It was that for the first time, he had looked at her, really looked at her, and seen something more than just the girl who poured his coffee.
The next morning, the bell above the door of the Gilded Bean chimed at exactly 10:15 a.m. Arthur shuffled in, the same tweed coat, the same permanent scowl. But Maya noticed something different, a flicker of purpose in his eyes. He ordered his usual black coffee, and the transaction was as clipped and wordless as ever. He took his cup and his newspaper and settled into his corner booth. An hour later, to the minute, he stood up and left, leaving his crumpled napkin and empty mug on the table. Maya went to clear it, but stopped. Tucked halfway under the newspaper was a small black moleskine notebook. It looked expensive. He must have forgotten it. She picked it up, intending to put it behind the counter, but it fell open to a bookmarked page. There wasn't a name or address inside, just a single handwritten paragraph on the right-hand page. It wasn't a note or a diary entry. It was a riddle, a business problem dressed up as a puzzle. It read, "A merchant has a fleet of 100 trucks. Every truck must visit one of 100 warehouses, each in a different city, before returning to the central depot. The goal is not the shortest route, but the lowest cost. Fuel costs vary by city, driver overtime varies by route, and each city has a different priority score for delivery speed. How do you create a system to determine the optimal route for the entire fleet every single day without calculating every possible combination, which would take 1,000 years? Below the riddle was a series of complex-looking diagrams and failed equations, all crossed out in frustrated red ink. It was a logistical nightmare. Chad walked by, snapping his fingers. "Maya, table 7 needs bussing. What is that? Customers' trash? Throw it out. We're not a lost and found." Maya instinctively closed the notebook, slipping it under her apron. "Right away, Chad." But she didn't throw it out. The problem hooked into her brain like a fish hook. All day, as she frothed milk, called out names, and wiped down counters, a part of her mind was untangling the puzzle. It wasn't about math, not really. It was about perspective. The merchant, the trucks, the warehouses, they were all misdirection. The real question was about prioritizing information. What mattered most? Fuel, time, or the priority score? The riddle wasn't about finding a single answer. It was about designing a system for thinking about the answer, a system that could adapt. And slowly, an idea began to form, elegant in its simplicity. On her 15-minute break, Maya sat in the cramped back room, the smell of burnt coffee beans thick in the air. She ignored her half-eaten sandwich, the forgotten notebook open in her lap. She took a napkin, the cheap, scratchy kind Chad bought in bulk, and a pen. She started to draw. Not a map, not an equation, but a simple triangle. At the 3 points, she wrote cost, speed, and priority. Inside the triangle, she drew a single floating point. Her solution was to stop thinking of it as a routing problem. That was the trap. It was a waiting problem. The system wasn't a fixed algorithm. It was a daily adjustment. You wouldn't route the trucks. You would rank the destinations. Every morning, you'd assign a numerical weight to each of the 3 factors based on that day's conditions. Is fuel cheap today? Cost gets a lower weight.
is a Chicago warehouse screaming for its delivery. Priority gets a higher weight. The trucks wouldn't be assigned routes. They'd be assigned scores. The driver with the best fuel efficiency takes the route with the highest cost weighting. The fastest driver gets the highest speed weighting. It was a dynamic, flexible system that turned a billion-variable problem into a simple, three-variable decision matrix every morning. Elegant. Simple. She was so absorbed, she didn't hear Chad come in. "What are you doing?" he demanded, pointing at the napkin. "Are you still wasting time with that old man's garbage? I swear, you actively look for ways to be unproductive. Upsell the pumpkin spice scones, restock the almond milk, do anything but doodle on napkins like a child." He snatched the napkin, looked at the strange diagram with contempt, and crumpled it into a ball. "This is why you're a barista, Maya. You focus on literal trash." He tossed it towards the garbage can, but it missed, rolling under a shelf. As he stormed out, Maya felt a familiar sting of frustration, but this time it was different. She wasn't just angry at Chad. She felt a protective urge for the idea on that napkin. After he was gone, she reached under the shelf and retrieved the crumpled ball of paper. She smoothed it out carefully and folded it, tucking it into her pocket. She didn't know why, but she felt like the strange diagram was important. It was her idea, and it was a good one.
The next day, Arthur was a no-show at 10:15 a.m., or 11, or 12. For the first time in 6 months, he broke his routine. Maya felt a strange pang of disappointment. Chad, on the other hand, was thrilled. "Thank goodness," he said. His general aura of gloom was bringing down our premium property values. But just as Maya was starting her afternoon shift, the door chimed. It was Arthur. He looked flustered, out of place. He bypassed the line and walked straight to the counter. "Excuse me," he said, his voice louder than usual. "I was in here yesterday. I think I may have left a notebook at my table, a black moleskine." Chad immediately sprang into action, his smarmy manager persona on full display. "A lost item, sir. Of course. We'll check our lost and found immediately. Maya, check the back." Maya didn't move. She met Arthur's gaze. He was looking directly at her, a question in his eyes. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out the small, black notebook. "This?" Relief washed over Arthur's face. "Ah, yes, thank you." He reached for it, but Maya held on for a second. "You didn't leave this," she said quietly. "You left a riddle inside it. I think you left it for me." Chad's face went white. "Maya, what are you talking about? Give the gentleman his property. I am so sorry, sir, for her unprofessional behavior." But Arthur's eyes never left Maya's. "And?" he prompted, his voice a low rumble. "The riddle." Maya hesitated for a second, then reached into her other pocket and pulled out the crumpled, smoothed-out napkin. She slid it across the counter. "I think you're asking the wrong question. You don't need to find the perfect route. You need a system that redefines perfect every single day." Chad looked like he was about to have a stroke. "She went through your notebook. This is a gross violation of customer privacy. She is fired. You are fired, Maya." But Arthur didn't even hear him. He picked up the napkin, his eyes tracing the simple triangle and the handwritten notes around it. He stood there for a full minute, his face a stone mask. The noisy cafe seemed to fade into the background. Then, slowly, he looked up from the napkin. The scowl, the permanent fixture of his face, was gone. In its place was a look of utter, unadulterated astonishment. And then he did something Maya had never seen him do before. He smiled. A real, genuine, world-changing smile. "My God," he whispered, mostly to himself. "It's so simple. It's brilliant."
Arthur looked up from the napkin, his eyes locking onto Maya's. The bustling coffee shop, the hiss of the espresso machine, Chad's sputtering indignation, it all melted away. "I need to be honest with you," Arthur said, his voice clear and strong. My name is Arthur Vance. I am the founder and CEO of Vanguard Innovations. Chad's mouth, which had been open to continue firing Maya, snapped shut with an audible click. The color drained from his face. He looked like he'd just seen a ghost who had then asked to see his quarterly reports. Arthur continued, his focus entirely on Maya. The riddle in that notebook isn't a game. It's a summary of the single biggest logistical crisis my company is facing. The Vanguard fleet problem, we call it. I have a team of 20 analysts, consultants from the top firms in the country who have been trying to solve it for 8 months. They've cost me $3 million in fees. You, he said, tapping the napkin, just solved it in a day, for the price of a cup of coffee. Maya was speechless. She felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. Billionaire, CEO, Vanguard Innovations. The pieces were clicking into place with terrifying speed. Arthur's gaze was intense. I'm sorry. In all the months I've been coming here, I've never asked your name. Maya, she managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. Maya, he repeated, savoring the name. I am building a new division at my company, a kind of internal think tank. We're calling it the Strategic Solutions Department. Its purpose is to look at our biggest problems from new angles, to disrupt our own paradigms before someone else does. I want you to run it. Maya stared at him, certain this was some kind of elaborate prank. Run it? I'm a barista. You are a brilliant strategic thinker who happens to be a barista. I'm offering you the position of department head. The starting salary is $500,000 a year, plus performance bonuses. You'll answer directly to me. A choked squeaking sound came from beside them. It was Chad, who was now vibrating with a strange mixture of terror and fawning desperation. The world had just been turned upside down, and he was struggling to find his footing on a landscape that was now tilting directly toward Maya. Chad's brain finally rebooted, switching from incompetent tyrant mode to groveling sycophant mode in record time. He lunged forward, a terrifyingly fake smile plastered on his face. Mr. Vance! Sir! What an honor! I had no idea! Chad Pembroke, General Manager, he said, extending a clammy hand, which Arthur completely ignored. Maya is, without a doubt, our finest employee. A true gem. I've been saying it for years. I was just testing her earlier, with that whole "you're fired" bit. A little motivational role-playing to keep her sharp. She's got a huge future ahead of her. Arthur finally turned his gaze to Chad. It was like watching a hawk notice a particularly irritating field mouse. His warm, appreciative expression vanished, replaced by a gaze so cold it could have frozen the latte machine solid. You're the manager here? Arthur asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Yes, sir. At your service. We pride ourselves on our premium... I've been coming here for 6 months. I have watched you belittle your staff. I have listened to you value customers based on the perceived price of their wristwatches. And I just heard you try to fire an employee for possessing an intellect that is clearly 100 times your own. You have a diamond in your hands, and your only instinct is to crush it because it doesn't look like a regular piece of glass. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen a few times. A few months ago, my family's private equity firm acquired the company that owns the commercial deeds to this entire city block. As of 3 minutes ago, he glanced at his phone, I have purchased the franchise rights for this specific location of the Gilded Bean, which means, Mr. Pembroke, I'm your boss. Chad's smile froze and then shattered. And my first act, as your new boss, is to inform you that your services are no longer required. You're fired. Please have your apron and your pathetic sense of authority off the premises within the hour.
For the second time that day, Chad was speechless. But this time, there was no recovery. He simply deflated, his arrogance and authority vanishing into thin air, leaving only a small, pathetic man who had just been publicly and spectacularly ruined. It was a moment of beautiful, karmic poetry. With Chad wilting in the corner, Arthur turned back to a shell-shocked Maya. "I apologize for the theatrics," he said, "but I have built my entire career on one principle. I do not tolerate people who stifle talent." Just as Maya was about to answer, the bell on the door chimed again, this time with a sharp, impatient energy. A young man, tall and dressed in a perfectly tailored suit that made him look like the cover of a business magazine, strode in. "Grandfather, what's going on? My phone's been blowing up with alerts from our property manager about a disturbance." He stopped short. His eyes met Maya's, and for a split second, the world seemed to slow down. He was, Maya's brain registered with an inconvenient lurch, breathtakingly handsome. He had sharp, intelligent eyes and a jawline that looked like it had been carved from marble. Her pulse did a little tap dance she wasn't expecting. The young man seemed to be having a similar short circuit. He looked at Maya, and his confident stride faltered. He took in her messy ponytail, the fire in her eyes, and a flash of something unguarded, pure, unadulterated attraction crossed his face before a mask of cool arrogance slammed back into place. "This is my grandson, Leo Vance," Arthur announced, a glint in his eye. "Leo, this is Maya, your new head of strategic solutions." Leo's eyes widened, first in confusion, then in dawning horror. He looked at Maya's worn-out apron to his grandfather. "You're joking," he said, the words clipped and sharp. The brief moment of attraction was instantly buried under a thick layer of disdain. This was the disturbance? This barista? Maya felt her own attraction curdle into indignation. So this was the heir. The man born with a silver spoon so large he probably used it as a shovel. The arrogance rolled off him in waves. "He doesn't seem to be joking," Maya said, her voice cool, crossing her arms. "Grandfather, a word, in private," Leo snapped. He pulled Arthur aside, hissing in a low voice. "Have you lost your mind? You put a coffee girl in charge of a multi-million-dollar department? This is humiliating." Arthur's voice was calm but firm. "That coffee girl solved the Vanguard fleet problem, something your team of MBAs couldn't do. She starts Monday." He turned back to Maya, who had watched the exchange with a defiant glare. "Maya, I trust you'll be able to handle my grandson's enthusiasm. He can be a bit traditional." "Don't worry," Maya said, her eyes locking with Leo's in a silent declaration of war. "I'm great with children." Leo's handsome face tightened, and Maya felt a strange, thrilling spark. This was going to be a nightmare, and a tiny, treacherous part of her brain admitted it was also going to be incredibly interesting. Maya's first day at Vanguard felt less like a job and more like entering a lion's den. The lion, in this case, was Leo Vance. He was waiting for her in the main boardroom, flanked by the senior logistics team, who all looked at her like she was a strange new species of insect. Leo, however, looked at her with a focused intensity that was both unnerving and, annoyingly, magnetic. "Miss, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your last name," he began, his voice dripping with false politeness. "I didn't give it," Maya shot back, placing her notebook on the vast, empty table. "You can just call me boss." A few of the team members shifted uncomfortably. Leo's lips thinned into a tight, angry line, but a flicker of something else, amusement, respect, danced in his eyes before he suppressed it. "Cute, very working-class hero of you. But here at Vanguard, we value qualifications over witty retorts. So, let's see what our new boss can do." He gestured to the massive screen, which lit up with the impossibly complex diagram of the Canton warehouse problem. "An easy one to start with," Leo said, a smirk playing on his lips. "Solve it. My team and I have been at it for a month, so we won't hold our breath." It was a public execution, and he was the master of ceremonies. He was trying to humiliate her, to prove to his grandfather and the whole company that she was a fluke. "A whole month?" Maya said, walking slowly toward the screen, feigning deep thought. "Wow, and you all have such expensive-looking degrees. That must be really embarrassing for you." Leo's smirk vanished. "Just solve the problem, barista." The word, meant to be an insult, landed with a thud. But Maya just smiled. "Fine," she said, turning her back to him and facing the screen. "But when I do, you have to get me a coffee, black, and you'll call me Maya." The challenge hung in the air. The whole room watched captivated as the war between the founder's pet project and the founder's grandson began. It was a battle of wits, of class, of wills. And underneath it all, a current of crackling, undeniable energy flowed between the two of them. Maya ignored the hostile stares and the weight of Leo's condescending gaze. She focused on the problem, her mind filtering out the noise. After a moment of silence that felt like an hour, she turned away from the screen and walked to the whiteboard. She didn't just present the solution, she deconstructed their flawed thinking, explaining how they were trapped by conventional wisdom. She laid out her cappuccino theory, using the surplus product to protect the deficit product. When she finished and capped the marker, the boardroom was utterly silent. The team of experts looked at the whiteboard, then back at Maya, their expressions of smug disbelief melting into pure, unadulterated awe. They weren't just impressed, they were enlightened. But Maya only looked at Leo. His face was a canvas of conflicting emotions. The arrogance was gone, replaced by shock. The disdain was gone, replaced by a grudging respect so profound it seemed to physically hurt him. He saw it, finally, the raw, untamed brilliance his grandfather had recognized. He saw her. Later that day, he found her in her new, cavernous office. She was staring out the window at the city below. "The coffee's on your desk," he said, his voice quiet. He bought it himself from a rival coffee shop, a silent act of surrender. "Thanks," she said, without turning around. He hesitated. "How you thought of that, the alpha-beta solution, it was—" He struggled for the word. "It wasn't logical. It was elegant." Sometimes logic is just a fancy way of being wrong with confidence, something you probably know a lot about. She turned to face him. It was a jab, but it lacked its earlier sting. "Ouch," he said, but a small, genuine smile touched his lips for the first time. "I deserve that." He looked at her, the attraction from that first moment in the coffee shop returning, now complicated by a healthy dose of awe. "For the record, I still think this is insane. But," he conceded, "you might just be the most brilliant, insane person I've ever met." "I'll take that as a compliment, Princeling." But she was smiling too. The battle was over, and a new, far more confusing and interesting game was just beginning. The following 6 months transformed Vanguard and the relationship between Maya and Leo. Their public bickering became legendary within the company, sharp, witty battles in the boardroom that, to everyone's surprise, always resulted in breakthrough ideas. They were a perfect, chaotic balance, her creative genius and his structured pragmatism. They argued, they challenged each other, and in the process, they made the company and each other better. The line between professional friction and personal chemistry blurred until it was non-existent. Which brought them to today, the Synapse Dynamics pitch. When the 3 tech bros walked in and saw Maya at the head of the table, their faces were a picture of pure horror. But this time, she wasn't alone. Leo was seated to her right, and he watched the unfolding scene with unconcealed amusement.
After Maya delivered her killer closing line, "Can I get anyone a coffee?" the tech bros mumbled their apologies and practically fled the room. Leo leaned over to her, his voice a low whisper in her ear. "That was unnecessarily cruel. I loved it." "I learned from the best," she whispered back, a smile playing on her lips. Their faces were inches apart, and the energy that had crackled between them since day one was now a warm, steady hum. Later that evening, they stood on the private balcony of her office, looking out at the glittering city lights. "You know," Leo said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I spent my whole life trying to earn my grandfather's respect. I got the best grades, went to the best schools, followed the entire playbook. And then you walked in with a coffee-stained apron and a solution on a napkin, and you did it in a day." "I wasn't trying to earn his respect," Maya said softly. "I was just trying to pay my rent." "I know," he said, turning to face her. "That's why it worked." He reached out, his hand gently touching her arm. "I was so determined to hate you, Maya. You stood for everything that threatened my world." "The feeling was mutual," she admitted, her heart beating faster. "I thought you were just another arrogant suit." "Was I wrong about you?" "Completely," she breathed. "Was I wrong about you?" "I hope so," he said, his eyes searching hers. "I'm tired of fighting it, Maya." "Me too," she whispered. And then he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a battle or a surrender. It was a treaty, a perfect, chaotic, and long overdue agreement. Across the city, in his penthouse, Arthur Vance looked at the Vanguard Tower, a building he had built from nothing. He didn't know about the kiss, not yet, but he knew his company was stronger than ever, and he knew his grandson was finally smiling again. He had found his brilliant, undervalued asset, and in doing so, he had secured not just the future of his company, but the future of his family. The fairy tale was complete.
I hope you enjoyed this story. Please tell us how you rate it from 0 to 10. Hey, subscribe to be notified when we release new stories. Click the like button and share with anyone you think might also like it. See you next time.